Hi everybody, welcome to the Evening Reader. I'm Priscilla. This is my second video for my new booktube channel, and I thought today I would just talk about what I've been reading lately and how things are going, and maybe talk about some of the picks that I have selected for March Mystery Madness. So I'll just jump right in. Right now, reading is kind of slowed to a crawl. Not great when you decide to start a booktube channel, but I think it's because I'm reading two really big books at the moment, and normally I kind of just focus on one book at a time, but when I read bigger books, I tend to also have like a, something lighter and easier to go to, and then I go back to the sort of chunkster, just because they're harder to get through, and especially because one of them is nonfiction, and I tend to read nonfiction more slowly than I read fiction. Yeah, I'm behind on my Goodreads goal. I think I'm like 3 books behind now, and I only have 52 books for the year. That's pretty much average what I read, about a book a week. But yeah, so I got to get on it. So the first book that I'm reading that I started in December, and it's a chunkster, and it is called Ninth Street Women. Lee Krasner, Elaine de Kooning, Grace Hartigan, Joan Mitchell, and Helen Frankenthaler, 5 painters and the movement that changed modern art. Yeah, sorry, I'm reading that off my screen. I don't have a copy. Yeah, reading it on the Kindle. I love my Kindle Paperwhite. This is not an endorsement. I'm not connected to Amazon. Uh, but I started this book back in December, and it's about 1,000 pages. Yeah, or I think close to 1,000 pages long. The text of the book is about 750 pages, and then there are 2 appendices. One is the paintings, and then the other is the endnotes. But I picked that book up because last year I read this book, The Cherry Robbers by Sarai Walker, and I cannot lie to you, I bought this book based on the cover. I just thought that it was a gorgeous cover, but it's also had a great description. It sounded very interesting to me, and I'll read it to you. Irish Chapel and her 5 elegant sisters, all of them heiresses to the Chapel firearms fortune, live cloistered in a lavish Victorian mansion. Neglected by both their distant father and troubled mother, who believes their home is haunted by the victims of chapel weapons, the sisters long to escape the eerie fairy tale of their childhood. For young women in 1950s Connecticut, the only way out is marriage, yet it soon becomes clear that for the Chapel sisters, marriage equals death. As soon as the eldest girl walks down the aisle, tragedy strikes, and the bride dies mysteriously the very next day. But this is just the beginning of a chain of tragedies that will make each sister wonder whether true love will kill her, too. Only Iris escapes, but can she outrun the family curse forever? A riveting, deliciously twisted feminist tale about the legacy of male power and the cost of female freedom. It's a really wonderful book. I don't even think that the description does it full justice, but if it sounds interesting to you, or if you've had this on your TBR, I highly recommend picking it up. I buddy read this with a friend of mine who lives in Atlanta. I actually live in Amsterdam. I don't think I mentioned that in my introductory video. But I picked up Ninth Street Women because I had wanted to read it. It was already on my TBR because I love abstract expressionism and modern art. But I picked it up because she talks about the fact that she really used that for heavy research for one of the characters in this book. So I'm happy that I've picked the book up, that I've definitely this one, but that I've picked up Ninth Street Women as well. But I started in December, and I'm only about 50% of the way through. It's been a bit of a frustrating ride. It's an interesting book. One of the main complaints on Goodreads is that the title is misleading and that the book is really not about the women. And I partially agree with that, and I partially don't agree with that. I have to say that when I came into this book, I didn't know how long it was or how big it was because I just got it on Kindle, and I hadn't seen a hard copy of it. But I expected that it would be pretty, pretty traditional for a nonfiction book, that it would be about the 5 artists, and that there'd be 5 sections, each dedicated to one of the artists, probably moving chronologically, sort of through their experiences and what they painted and the influence that they had on the movement. But that is not what the author, Mary Gabriel, is doing here. And so, you know, what she's basically doing is rewriting the history of abstract expressionism and putting these women back into the story sort of in their rightful place, which is an overwhelming exercise and a hard, difficult thing to do. Probably the right thing to do, though, I have to say. It makes more sense in context than pulling these women out individually. And a few of them, I believe Lee Krasner, Elaine de Kooning, and Helen Frankenthaler, there are separate, they've had biographies written about them. I think actually maybe Joan Mitchell has as well. I think it's Grace Hartigan is the one who, I think there is no biography of her. But a big complaint is that this book is as much about the men as it is about these 5 women, and that actually that Gabriel is spending too much time on the men. But it would be very difficult, I think, to put them in context and not talk about the men. Lee Krasner was married to Jackson Pollock, and obviously Elaine de Kooning was married to the Dutch painter Willem de Kooning. And they aren't the only men that Gabriel talks about. She talks about Arshile Gorky, she talks about Larry Rivers, and she talks about sculptors. She also gets into Frank O'Hara, John Ashbery, and a lot of the modernist poets. And I think it's working overall, but it's very, 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 did I say very? Detailed. I mean, down to, we learned that Elaine and Bill de Kooning were taking ketchup and water and making soup because they were so poor. So there's a lot of minutia. I guess that's the way to say it. There's a lot of minutia. And I'm really finding myself having to resist skimming. I don't want to skim. When I first started the book, I liked all the detail. It really does give you a sense of immediacy, but she also really feels the need to give you a backstory on every single person she introduces. So she'll introduce maybe somebody who is really not a major player and spend a page and a half telling you about their background, where they came from, sort of how they came to be in New York, and then what they were doing there, and then where they lived and who they lived with. She just, I'm not really sure why she's making some of these choices. Yeah, I don't know. And I'm gonna keep going. Like I said, I'm about 50% through, and I'm committed to finishing it because I would like to see the book. I think it starts in the late 20s, and then I think it goes through either the late 60s or the early 70s. And I want to see how she talks about the later periods of abstract expressionism, and how the rise of pop art and those sorts of things affected what these artists were doing, and the effect they had on that form of art. And then also, more about the feminist movement and the war, and how maybe that affected the later period of abstract expressionism. But I'm not sure how soon I'll finish it, because it's an easy book to go back to. I don't really forget much, but I have to say this, I do forget who people are, not the main characters, but she'll introduce somebody, give a lot of backstory, and then not mention them again for 200 pages, and then just drop the name in like you remember who this is. That's also a bit, well, I'm not making this sound like a very good book. It is a very good book so far. And I think if you are interested in art, if you're interested in the life of the artists or that time period in American art, this is probably a really worthwhile read. But yeah, I would just say go into it not expecting it to be just specifically focusing on those 5 women. They feature largely, but this really is an exercise in writing them back into a broader history of art. And so, the second book that I have been reading lately, and that I picked up at the beginning of February, and well, I think at the middle of February, is Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb. And this is the first book in the Mad Ships trilogy, which is the second trilogy in the realm of the Elderlings series, which has 17 books in it. And I read last year the Farseer trilogy, which is the first trilogy in the realm of Elderlings series. And this is the first book of the second trilogy. The first series deals with Fitz and the Fool, and sort of sets up their relationship. I'm not going to go into that for a long. It's a really worthwhile trilogy to read. I'm just tanking this. I'm not a big fantasy reader. These I'm getting into because I bought them for my husband. Well, I bought him the first book, and he's not much of a reader, but he absolutely just fell into these books, and he finished the entire series he just actually finished the entire series, the last book in the series, a couple of weeks ago. He could not put them down, and I said I would read them also, and I did read the first trilogy, and now I'm reading, this is The Live Ship Traders. This is what the name of this trilogy is, The Live Ship Traders. Okay, not the Mad Ship trilogy. I think that's what I called it. And this is about pirates. I really love the way Robin Hobb writes. I am not a fantasy reader, but she is fantastic. Her books are very character driven. She sets a scene so well. Atmosphere. I've never found myself confused. Her pacing is mostly terrific. There were moments in one of the books of the last trilogy where it got a little draggy, but I'm not talking about that right now. But I just started this one. I'm on chapter 5, 118 pages in, and this one's different. It's multi-point of view, and it's about pirates, and I'm really enjoying it so far. So we'll see how that goes, and if I finish that trilogy this year, because that's another chunkster. Yeah. Okay. So March Mystery Madness picks. My first pick for March Mystery Madness is Finley Donovan is Killing It, and it is on my Kindle, so I don't have it to show to you. Maybe I'll figure out how to pop a graphic there. I don't know how to do that yet, but maybe I'll figure it out. Everybody's reading that book. Everybody seems to be reading that book. Finley Donovan is an author. She's separated from her husband. She's got writer's block. She's struggling to know what to do. She goes to a meeting at a coffee shop with her, or like a Panera. I think she is actually at a Panera, with either her agent or her editor. And a woman overhears her talking about getting a job done, getting paid, and thinks that she is actually talking about killing someone. And so she slides a note to her and says she wants to talk to her about hiring her. And so that's as far as I am in the book right now, because I have already started it, and it's pretty amusing, and everybody really seems to be enjoying this. I think the third book is just out or is coming out soon, so I think that one should be a lot of fun. So since I've already started it, I'll just keep going and see how that goes. The second book I think I'm going to read for March Mystery Madness is Patricia Highsmith's Strangers on a Train. I think maybe a lot of you have read this. I know Patricia Highsmith is very popular. This is about two men who meet on a train and strike a bargain to each kill somebody for the other one. And I think the gist is that one of them actually goes through with the promise they make, with the pact, and then the other one is trying to figure out how to get out of it. I think that's basically the premise. I don't know if this was a movie or not. But I read Talented Mr. Ripley probably about 10 years ago. So this will be my second Patricia Highsmith to read. So I think that this will be fun. And since it's a classic and I really like the way she writes, and I have read her book on writing thrillers and mysteries, which was actually quite good. I don't have it. It's not part of my books on writing collection, but maybe someday. Yeah, looking forward to that one. And then the third book that I have, I only have 3 on the list right now because I just showed you those chunksters and I don't know how that's going to go. So, and oh, by the way, yeah, I think I'm supposed to be tying this to a theme. There's lather, rinse, repeat, and spring cleaning. But I think I'm going to tie them to a theme when I maybe do the individual reviews. I'll come up with a clever thing about how they relate to that. Yeah, I don't know. I'm new. So this is a nonfiction book. It's not, I guess it's not technically a true crime book, but it is the story of a crime. And it's by the writer Janet Malcolm. And I don't know if you've ever heard of Janet Malcolm. She was a writer for The New Yorker, and she's fantastic. She did a lot of character profiles for The New Yorker, and she writes with a very novelistic sense. She just is very, very good at building characters and looking at people's motives and just really bringing out vivid portraits of people. She has like 2 essay collections. Hang on, let me grab them. These are her collected works from The New Yorker. Her first one is 41 False Starts. And I think that was published in the early 2000s. And then this one, I believe, was published in 2018, which is Nobody's Looking at You. And I think this is the one that has, for example, has a really interesting, the Nobody's Looking at You article, the titular article or essay or profile is about Eileen Fisher. And it's really fascinating, but she just does a really fascinating job at doing these kinds of profiles. But she also writes books, and this is called The Crime of Sheila McGuff, and I'll read to you what it says. In the winter of 1996, Janet Malcolm received a letter from a stranger, a disbarred lawyer named Sheila McGuff, who had recently been released from prison, and who wrote that she had been convicted of crimes she had not committed. Malcolm decided to look into the case, and this book, a dazzling work of journalism, as well as a searching meditation on character, on the law, and on the incompatibility of narrative with truth, that sounds intriguing, is the product of her growing belief that a miscarriage of justice had taken place. Sheila McGuff was prosecuted and convicted because the government, and then the jury, interpreted her zealous representation of a con man client named Bob Bales as collaboration in his fraud. Malcolm's close reading of court records and her interviews with lawyers and businessmen connected with the case, give a picture of American law and American cupidity that is startling in its pitiless specificity. And her portrait of Sheila McGuff, a woman of almost preternatural honesty and decency, as well as maddening literal-mindedness and discursiveness, brings an unconventional new heroine into vivid being. I don't know. I just thought this sounded really fascinating. And another book that you might know Janet Malcolm from is called The Journalist and the Murderer, in which it's a book she wrote about the guy, Joe McGinnis, who wrote the book Fatal Attraction. and about how it's about whether he was unethical in becoming friends with, oh gosh, I can't remember the name of the guy. The guy who was the main character in Fatal Attraction. Hang on, I have the interwebs right here. Okay, that's the movie. Thank you. Sorry. Oh, I typed in Fatal Attraction. Did I say Fatal Attraction this whole time? Fatal Vision. Fatal Vision. Okay. Yeah. Fatal Vision. Jeffrey McDonald. Jeffrey McDonald. And it was also a mini series in the 1980s. Fatal Attraction. Yeah, no. Sorry. Fatal Vision. That is the story, the true crime story of a Marine who is convicted of killing his wife and 3 children. And he essentially tried to say that it wasn't him, and the defense said that it was a Manson-like murder, that it was a band of hippies broke into his house and killed his wife and children and left him for dead. And he went back through several appeals. Yeah, very, very sketchy. But sorry, my computer's beeping at me. This is where I get to learn how to edit. Yeah. So she wrote this book about whether or not Joe McGinnis, who was the author, actually was unethical in pretending to befriend Jeffrey McDonald so that he could learn inside information about the case for his book. And he ended up sharing what he learned from Jeffrey McDonald with prosecutors. Yeah, very, very interesting case, very interesting book as well. So those are my primary picks for March Madness. I have a lot of mysteries on my Kindle that I haven't read yet. I have way too many books. I think maybe I'll do a video sometime about not my TBR, but I guess my STR, my shelf to read, which means I own it, but I haven't read it yet. It's in 3 figures. It's in 3 figures. It's not close to 4 figures, but it's in 3 figures. So not really proud of that. Some other options I have are A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. That's one I thought I might pick up. Or possibly there's a book by Elizabeth Hand, who is a really interesting writer. She has her Cass Neary series. If you haven't read her and you like mystery series that are sort of gritty, if you like Sarah Gran, if you like the Claire DeWitt books by Sarah Gran, you would probably like Elizabeth Hand. She's really terrific. But she has a standalone book called Curious Toys that sounds pretty good. I think it's set in the late 19th century or early 20th century. So sort of a historical mystery there. Anyway, I think that's kind of a wrap. Yeah, thanks for visiting. If you made it this far, please like and subscribe. Please leave a comment. Let me know if any of these books sound interesting to you, or maybe just let me know if you're planning on joining March Mystery Madness and what you're reading, or if you're reading along with some of your other favorite booktubers. I'd love to hear. And I hope that you have a great day. Talk to you later. Bye.